We've got to dig into this insane speech by Trump and Hegseth that really appears to have the military's top brass rattled, because it is just weird and crazy and cringe moment after one another. And arguably more importantly, it signals what might happen to the country pretty soon. Because last week you had Defense or War Secretary Pete Hegseth ordering hundreds of the military's top commanders to Marine Corps base Quantico in Virginia for a speech today. The topic leading up, it was a mystery, which, really confused a lot of people because one, it's unclear why he just didn't do this virtually, which would have saved a lot of money and travel time. And two, the announcement came just kind of out of nowhere with little time to prepare. But with that, according to at least the Daily Mail, who said they spoke to two Pentagon staffers, it was because of Pete Hegseth's state of mind. And according to them, he's been, quote, crawling out of his skin in recent weeks out of fear that he'll be assassinated like Charlie Kirk. With them then reportedly adding that he's been erupting in tirades, raging at staffers, and obsessing about matters related to his security. One even reportedly saying there's a manic quality about him, or let me rephrase, an even more manic quality, which is really saying something. And you had both sources explaining that they felt an extra duty to temper his abrupt decisions, but that he, quote, takes things personally when challenged, like full-blown tantrums. But with whatever was happening behind the scenes, you had Hegseth summoning generals, admirals, officers, pretty much everyone above a certain rank for this meeting, which was already extremely unusual. But then things got even stranger once he opened his mouth.
To our enemies, F-A-F-O.
And for the two of you that don't know, that's fuck around and find out. And that bit, it pretty much kind of summed up the tone and the tenor of this event pretty nicely. Because you had Hegseth coming right out of the gate with some very aggressive rhetoric.
To ensure peace, we must prepare for war. From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this: warfighting. Preparing for war and preparing to win. Unrelenting and uncompromising in that pursuit. Not because we want war. No one here wants war. But it's because we love peace.
You had Hexseth saying that the United States is the most lethal and effective military power on Earth, but it finds itself in an increasingly dangerous world. And he called this a moment of urgency, saying that enemies gather, threats grow. And so in terms of concrete changes, he called for increased spending on pretty much everything. Troops, weapons, vehicles, AI, you name it. But then he also spent the vast majority of his speech arguing that about what the military really needs is the right people and the right culture. And to him, that means so-called dewokifying the armed forces.
For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. We became the woke department.
With Hegseth clarifying that he doesn't want to kick all women out of the military, he just wants to hold everybody to high gender-neutral standards. And if a woman can meet that, great, but if not, too bad. And then he clarified again that the military doesn't actually need new standards, it just needs the hard-nosed culture to enforce existing ones. So this is, you have critics countering that there's no evidence that standards have been lowered for women or racial minorities, and if anything, the military has become more effective because it's become more diverse. But according to Hegseth's telling, the US has lost war after war since 1945 because its military has become infected with social justice, politically correct, and toxic ideological garbage.
No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that shit.
Right. And then his next target that he really harped on was big people.
Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon. This also means grooming standards. No more beards, long hair, superficial individual expression. We don't have a military full of Nordic pagans.
And so to professionalize the War Department, he announced directives mandating regular physical fitness tests and grooming standards for almost everybody, even if they're not in active combat roles. With Hegseth then calling this Liberation Day for the military, and he declared that leaders are now free to enforce rigorous standards, whether that means cursing at soldiers or even getting physical with them.
That's why today, at my direction, we're undertaking a full review of the department's definitions of so-called toxic leadership, bullying, and hazing, to empower leaders to enforce standards without fear of retribution or second guessing. We are overhauling an Inspector General process, the IG, that has been weaponized, putting complainers, ideologues, and poor performers in the driver's seat. We're doing the same with the equal opportunity and military equal opportunity policies, the EO and MEO at our department. No more frivolous complaints. No more anonymous complaints, no more repeat complainants, no more smearing reputations, no more endless waiting, no more legal limbo, no more sidetracking careers, no more walking on eggshells.
Right, and so you saw many hearing that and saying that sounds like he's essentially giving officers a blank check to abuse their subordinates. Right, and that as the Pentagon has long struggled to root out a well-documented culture of racism, sexual assault, and even rape. Though with this, you had Hexseth promising that racism and sexual harassment, they're still illegal and will be ruthlessly enforced, with him adding,
but telling someone to shave or get a haircut or to get in shape or to fix their uniform or to show up on time or to work hard, that's exactly the kind of discrimination we want.
You also had Hexseth declaring that soldiers are now free to fight the way they need to without bureaucrats tying their hands.
No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters.
And again, you had people seeing that as him essentially giving soldiers a blank check to commit war crimes with impunity. But then finally, he claimed to know that the overwhelming majority of people in that room agree with everything that he's saying and invited anyone who doesn't to resign. And also on that note, he's already promised to fire 20% of the military's roughly 800 generals and admirals. And so understandably, many of those in the room were reportedly afraid that he'd fire them right there, though Hexseth, he didn't end up doing that. And what he ended up saying was that throughout the entire speech, the crowd remained almost totally silent and stone-faced, right, upholding their commitment to be apolitical even in the face of such hyper-partisan comments. That said, but behind the scenes, some people were a little more vocal, with reportedly 8 current and former officials telling the Washington Post that multiple top officers, including Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane, are privately critical of the new direction that Hexseth's taking the military, with them reportedly taking issue with the new national defense strategy, especially with how it reorients focus away from foreign threats and toward domestic ones, as well as all the partisan language in the document, including direct mentions of Joe Biden. And you had several sources adding that dissent during the drafting process is normal, but the number of officials concerned and the depth of their criticism, it's unusual, right? And so that was Hexseth. And then you had Trump's, which was, it felt definitely low energy for him, though it was still rambly, but it also had some standout moments. So as far as the ramble and the scope, I mean, he was talking about naming the Department of War, naming the Gulf of America, supposedly ending all the wars in the world, signing generals and admirals commissions himself instead of an auto pen, not getting the Nobel Peace Prize, his tariffs, how he won the election, and how he's mistreated by the press. Also, the man fucking loves paper, apparently. But easily, the most explosive remarks came when he explained how the military would become America first.
Only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia, while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms.
With Trump then making it very clear who the culprit for that invasion is, the radical left Democrats.
What they've done to San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war, too. It's a war from within. And I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military. Because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city.
Or with Trump claiming that everybody in those cities, they love the military being there, and when they don't, it's because they were paid off by George Soros and others. And so, with this, well, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts, opinions, reactions. This isn't just a news show, it's a conversation. So quickly, just add my opinion here. This felt deranged. I know a lot of what he said are things that he's said before or kind of close to, but in this specific setting with the audience that he had, this felt like a very different thing. It really seemed like he was declaring war on American cities. It really seemed like there is a plan to weed out everyone except the loyalists. And unfortunately, the thing we're gonna have to wait to see in the coming days, weeks, months, and years is how much of this is a kind of chest puffing LARP, and how much of this is a successful crackdown that I think many would call authoritarian in nature. Also, sad news that Hexseth said that Trump can't be a general.